When seeking out visual inspiration for an artwork, plant life and flowers can be a great place to start, and that is because nature has this extensive library of structures with unique colors to draw inspiration from that can be found from various places within the world. And with that being said, in today's video we will be looking specifically at how to draw a Japanese cherry blossom, otherwise known as the sakura flower. So once again, welcome to another tutorial by artincontext.org, where we explore various art related topics. My name is Matt, and in today's video we are going to break down the process of how to create the cherry blossom through a few simple steps. Now with that being said, this tutorial is done on a digital device. However, all drawing processes can be transferred to traditional materials, so you do want to just make sure though you are working with layering materials, whether it is pencils, paint, as we will kind of be working with a layering process. So with that being said, we can start off this tutorial with a very simple sketch by shaping the cherry blossom tree. So let's take a close-up approach and start by forming the cherry blossom branches. We are going to keep the sketch fairly loose at this point, so we can keep it quite simple with very slight curvature to create a very unique shape on the branch, giving it kind of this downward arcing formation to kind of just give a unique nuance to the shape of our branch. Now the idea is to have the flowers blooming in some areas and sprouting in others. The shape of the cherry blossom flower is quite simple, with a set of spear-headed petals that circulate the stigma, and generally they come in groups of 5. So the idea is to have the flowers blooming in some areas and sprouting in others. The shape of the cherry blossom flower is quite simple, with a set of spear-headed petals that do circulate that stigma structure. Once again, the petals are very thin and can easily curl, so they also come in various shapes depending on what angle you are looking at the flower from. So we do want to kind of create variation in terms of perspective, having flowers kind of blooming in an upward direction or towards the actual viewer, where we see all 5 petals in a equally sized proportion. But as we slowly form these flowers along the branch, we can keep the sketch fairly light at this point, so just keep your sketch quite loose and simple. From there you can then slightly erase the drawing to then leave some ghost lines that will allow you to sketch over and refine the structure of each individual flower on the singular branch. Now as we work through the branch, we can also move our way towards the tip of the branch where the flowers are still sprouting, so naturally the shape of the sprouting flower is slightly more teardrop shaped. Again, consider looking at some reference images as you kind of continue with this drawing process, just to see the shape of blooming flowers compared to that of fully bloomed flowers on a sakura tree. Now the cherry blossom is quite unique, and the intention is to create a variety in the flowers along the branch. This way we kind of capture all the unique sprouting degrees in various flowers as they are situated on the singular branch. But again, keep your drawing fairly light for now, keep the sketch very loose as we slowly start to transition into adding color to the sakura flower drawing. Now the sakura cherry blossom petals are mostly pink and white in coloration, with colors having kind of a very seamless integration, so we want to start adding very light hues of pink for now, where we slowly build up the flower in various layers of color, starting with the lightest colors first. Now naturally we do want to make sure we are working with a contrasted background to really make our flower drawing pop. If you are working with a digital device, you can just integrate this into a lower layer, making sure that the flower is on the top layer, and this is going to create a distinction between your background being a different color and your flower really popping into the foreground. Now as we proceed with our colors, we want to start integrating some light hues of pink and white into the entire shape of each flower, so we want to make sure we stay within the borders of the petals, which we can then slowly refine with some line work thereafter. We can start using some light tones of red along the edges of the petals to bring more shape to the actual flower, and naturally the idea is to remain within the spectrum of these pink and white hues. So pinks can kind of go into the more shadowy qualities that can be represented by darker reds, but the idea is to shape the flower with reds. The way we give a definition with these reds is also going to just then remain within the actual pink spectrum, keeping to the right coloration. Now we are going to start basically refining the cherry blossom sketch, so as we proceed with this color integration, we can start working strategically with line work and strokes to create a sense of texture. The idea is to add some strokes along the surface of the petals to suggest some ridges. We can also work simultaneously with a color combination between red, pink and white, so we want to build up the color values from darker to lighter colors. This way we can also add in different strokes to create texture. So we can also start bringing some shape to the branch of the cherry blossom drawing, and we can do this with darker colors as well. So between browns and blacks as well, we can then create a distinction between the actual flowers and the branches, and that's where we start to build up our layers, thinking naturally about what kind of color values would be in each of those structures. This is why we do want to consider working with a reference image, just to kind of assist us in a more accurate representation of color within these various features. You can also start to add some darker coloration to the center of each flower, so this will help to create a sense of dimension as light does struggle to penetrate the center of the flower's features. So we are building up that shadowy tonal variation within the actual center of the flower, and as we do so, we'll start to see how this does create that distinction in tonal variation between the exposed petals to a light source compared to that of the more shadowed quality in the center of the flower, otherwise known as the stigma. Now, as we continue working with layering colors with the cherry blossom drawing, you want to work with layering colors into different features. So we want to consider the source of light and how this will naturally make some areas lighter than others for all the unique features in our cherry blossom drawing. So with the petals, we can make them slightly darker with pinks and some slightly lighter, and this way we create a little more definition within the structure of the flower. So the same goes for the branches. We can make the transition between lighter and darker colors along the branches for more three-dimensionality, and that's what we're trying to achieve here. We're trying to work with the right color spectrum to achieve three-dimensionality in the various features. As you maintain this quality of shifting between lighter and darker color values in both the flowers and branches, we start to see how it becomes slightly more three-dimensional. Now try to keep the colors between greens and browns, specifically for the branches. Again, really thinking about the actual color variation that is present in an actual branch. So naturally we are trying to represent that three-dimensional quality between shadowed and highlighted areas, and what we want to do is we want to work with the correct color sequence. So with the branch, we can kind of work with greens and browns, and this is something we want to bear in mind conceptually for all the features. So as we shift towards the more bulbous-like sprouting flowers, or those unique flower shapes that are still kind of sprouting, we do want to think about how the coloration isn't as vivid yet, or does differ to that of an actual sprouted or fully bloomed flower. Now naturally, as we continue with this, again, consider looking at a reference image, especially for the difference in color between a sprouting and fully bloomed flower. Now as we continue, we're going to start adding in some finer details to the cherry blossom sketch. So once we have integrated color and created shape within the various elements, we can proceed to give more definition by subtle outlines and darker shading, and lastly some highlights. Now as we do so and aim to make a more realistic representation of a cherry blossom, we want to make sure that we add these last details to refine the flower slightly further. We always want to work on building up details within our cherry blossom drawing. So this is where we think about the layering quality, how we think about the color spectrum in different elements, such as the petals having these lighter pink hues and then shifting into reds. We want to work with these various colors as we build up these final details. Now we also want to start adding in the center features of each flower as a last addition to provide a sense of depth to them and how they are positioned on top of each flower. So we want to work with both white and black linear strokes that originate from the center of the flower or the stigma of the flower to represent the individual filaments. So the filaments are these little strands that kind of sprout from the center of the flower, with these little small orange spots to represent anthers at the edge of each filament, and we can slowly start to add in a few of these to each flower. So this is the last feature within the actual drawing process of adding in details to our cherry blossom drawing, and we really want to make sure we take our time with this feature. So we do want to think about the perspective and the angle at which each flower on our cherry blossom branch is positioned, and naturally those anthers flow in a perpendicular fashion depending on the actual perspective, from the center of each flower. So naturally think about the perspective and the position of each flower on your branch and what kind of direction it is facing to really have an accurate representation of this feature. Take your time with this feature, make sure you add in these linear strokes and making sure that you add in these yellow and orange little circular spots at the edge or at the end of each filament to really kind of capture that realistic detailing within your cherry blossom drawing. But otherwise, make sure to take your time going through each flower, making sure that they flow outwardly specifically for this feature. And lastly, as we kind of come to the end of this drawing process, make sure you take your time whilst also going through each flower to add in little moments of highlights to maintain a sense of consistency within the light source. So this is something that you do want to make sure you kind of work within the more exposed petal shapes, the ones that seem to be more exposed to the light source, depending on what kind of direction your light source is present. But otherwise, that is the basic process of how to draw a cherry blossom flower, also known as the sakura flower. Thanks again for tuning in, guys. If you did like this video, please let us know if you're interested in similar or related topics, maybe anything related to drawing or painting flowers, plant life. You let us know. We'd love to hear back from you guys. You can also show your support by liking and subscribing. That helps us to grow the channel and allows us to make more art related content for you guys, which we love to do. Thanks again for tuning in. That is it from me today. Until next time, see you in the next video. Cheers.